Welcome to episode 28 of Insights for Business Owners. This month we have Corinna Hagen, who is the founder and CEO of Zaradigm, a business consulting and executive coaching firm. Corinna, great to have you on the podcast.
So great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I have been the beneficiary of Corinna's great work. I am a client. Our firm is a client. She's fabulous. And we're having her on here because so many of our clients buy a business and are brand new to owning and operating a business. And that is where Corinna can be so helpful. So, Corinna, we're kind of starting at the beginning here, but what can a business consulting and executive coach do for a new business owner?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. A lot. I mean, for a new business owner, especially if you're pre-inception, if you still consider starting a business, the business coach can give you guidance on how to approach that. So you start on the right foot and you verify your business idea. So there's a market for it, and you are ending up in the 10% that survive the first year versus the other 90% that failed. Right? We know the statistics, right? That 90% of businesses fail within the first 1 or 2 years, and so you set yourself up for success, and you get the right resources, maybe funding, and so that's one thing. If you have started your business already, a lot of small business owners, especially in the beginning, they have excitement because the vision is fresh and all of the hope is still driving all the energy, and then you quickly begin to wear yourself out. So right, because then it's like driving the hamster wheel to get business in the door, right? At the same time, you're still fine tuning your product or your service. So all of these things are happening simultaneously because you're wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
And maybe you are right on the money and people are buying your services or your product right away. Wonderful.
Yep.
Then you have, from an M&A perspective, you hit that point where the work is getting so much that you have to, like, it's too much for you, but not
Right.
enough to hire somebody full time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you think, then I just work more. I don't have the time to set aside for strategic contemplation, which is a big mistake.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Big
I
mistake.
love
So
that
now
phrase.
you would have,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I just love that phrase, strategic contemplation. Like it's interesting.
Shamelessly stolen from Bill Gates.
Oh, is that right? I was going to give you full credit for that.
No. There's a famous interview that to date, I have that in my bookmarks and I share that with anybody who doesn't want to know about it. And it's an interview with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett.
Oh, wow.
And they talk about time management. Well, in that little segment that I'm referencing, they talk about time management. And Warren Buffett shows the interviewer his little calendar, like a tiny little pocket calendar,
Yeah.
right? Like really old fashioned, like, the old ones where
Right.
you write with a pencil.
Writes down with a
Yeah.
pen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not digitally, like something like when you put it in there, it's going to stay in there forever. Yeah. And,
Wow.
and there's a lot of free space in there, which is what you would not expect
Right.
from somebody, with
That busy. Yeah.
that busy. Yeah, you would think he's busy, but I wrote an article that I titled "Busy is the New Stupid" because
Ha!
after I've listened to that interview, I thought, these guys are smart. They consider just that hamster wheel that I just described earlier being the most stupid investment that you can make.
Wow.
In other words, but Bill Gates said, to paraphrase, that strategic contemplation is probably the best allocated time, the most important time that a CEO spends on the business.
Wow.
So deliberately reserving this much time on your calendar to know where you're going. And I have seen how important that is, not just for business owners, but for like an executive in any organization.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't reserve that time, people say, oh, I'm too busy to do any of those things, to join a mastermind like you have, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you feel too busy to do that, you will feel too busy to do anything.
Right.
Because you're not taking a step back and
Mm-hmm.
investing in the quality of decisions you need to make. Strategic contemplation is having the clarity of knowing where's my time best invested, not
Mm.
what can I do with my time and just jamming my calendar full of anything that the business could do. I could do
Right.
a thousand things.
Sure.
Strategic contemplation is determining where's the best effort placed, right? And so in our mastermind, as you know, right, we'll
Yeah.
work on what that would look like together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the value there.
That's That's great. And actually, and we're kind of new on YouTube with the podcast. We've been on Spotify and stuff, but I think what we're going to try to do, if you don't mind sharing informally that interview, we'll put that, in the notes and links on YouTube. And then also, if you don't mind sharing your article, we can also share that with our listeners. I think that's really, really valuable. But I want to step back because I didn't know, and I think this is really helpful for our listeners, that you can help people before they buy a business. You can help them strategize and plan and vet their acquisition targets, it sounds like, before they even get into it. And that would be really helpful as a first step for these M&A, searchers trying to find a business to buy.
Yeah, because now it's a more methodical approach to things rather
Mm-hmm.
than like, putting the finger in the air and seeing where the wind blows, basically,
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah. And then,
And
one
I,
thing for them is many of them are, maybe they're have an MBA and they have a traditional, more white collar background, but they then end up running, a roofing business with all sort of blue collar type employees. So is that something you can help them think about, is how do I deal with these totally different sorts of people I'm now employing?
when you mean by how to deal with different sorts of people, how the
Yep.
business owner deals with different
Yes.
personality on his, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually interesting that you say that. I think, did you and I not talk about things like, like a personality assessment can give you some insight into how other people think, right?
Oh, yeah. That's
One way of
good.
doing that, of course,
Yeah.
we can also talk about observation in communication style. That gives you a lot of
Mm.
mileage already. If I
Mm.
asked you, hey, spend a week just taking note of how people prefer to communicate. How do you prefer to communicate? Interestingly, when I
Mm.
work with corporate leaders, a lot of them, when I first ask that question, they don't even know how to answer the question because they might know it, but they have never wrapped their minds around it consciously.
Mm.
And it's a helpful exercise because when we know, we also know why somebody rubs us the wrong way, the way they
Mm.
communicate. And it
Mm.
helps us to articulate more clearly how we
Mm.
tango well together. How do I prefer to work with you?
Mm.
I'm a person, I don't like to insert myself a lot into your work. So I could, that's my risk, right? I could come across as laissez-faire, but I'm far from it. I'd
Mm.
like to get updates, but I'd
Mm-hmm.
like you to come. So
Mm.
I prefer somebody that gives me semi-frequent, like depending on the project, but gives me some orientation. Let's say we have like a deadline for a project in 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So maybe in the beginning, like do one or two check-ins just to see if the direction is right, so
Yeah.
that we don't have to overcorrect in the end,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then after that, maybe every week, send me something, and I feel pacified. It's okay. I don't feel like I have
Yeah.
to be fearful of whether or not you're working at all, right? So I don't have to
Right.
guess, but that's
Right.
my preference.
So
But
that's
that's
really
my
interesting.
preference. Now I can articulate it, and that's what I would recommend to leaders to do. Like, examine your own preferences and
Mm.
pet peeves. Then you have something to articulate, and then see how other people communicate. Communication is often how we express our personalities, how we deal with other people, right? And our
Mm-hmm.
value system. So that's another way to approach it.
This is so great, and it's just like very novel in my world. So that's something I never thought of, that these people looking to buy a business should probably do a personality, test, or what you're talking about, as a first step before they even think about this. Um, And what can they learn about themselves, I guess, from doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm a fan of a particular one. I think you and
Okay.
I have spoken when we met, right,
Yeah.
the first time. That is called Principles U. It's an
Hmm.
entirely free assessment
Hmm.
for business owners who want to do that with their teams to get to know each other. There's a team version of that too.
Hmm.
It's called that's Principles Us.
Hmm.
Why I like that is because you have it. It helps you have those conversations on, the they call it the art of working with me.
Wow.
What does
I
that
like
look
that.
like?
The
So
art
it
of working
really
with me.
helps that have that conversation and improve that. And
Wow.
yeah, so how do you use a personality assessment? If you do it right, you don't look at it to grade you. And I don't know if that's human nature. I guess so. They look at a personality assessment, and some people don't like personality assessments because they feel boxed in. They go, I don't want to be that. But that's not
Mm.
what a personality assessment is. It should just be a tool for learning about yourself, right? It
Yeah.
only gives you what you gave it anyways. So
You
however
have to be
you
honest,
answer the
right? Yeah.
questions is what it spits out, right? And then of course it will put out some labels.
Right.
Labels in a sense of you have to give it some naming. If you say like, oh, you were the achiever type, or right, or you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
type of personality, you might not like that name, then give it some other name that resembles the summary of the answers you gave.
Hmm.
That's fine. What's more important is we want to learn about ourselves and the other person's preferences, the
Hmm.
values that drive that, because now you have a way to articulate why something is meaningful to you, where you are challenged, and how you could get it. This is really important.
Yeah.
How you could get in your own way.
Ah, I
For
never do
leaders to
that,
know,
Corinna.
especially business leaders, how do I get in my own way?
Mm.
That's gold.
Well, that's, I love talking to you and learning all this, and it just makes me think of so many things. But um, it seems like then once you do something like that, as a business owner, you kind of learn more about the culture that fits well with you and that you can create because it fits with your personality. Is that, helpful?
Yes and no. I
Mm.
mean, you might want to bring on people if you know about yourself and what could get in the way of your success, or you know your strength, but you also know what you need to compensate for the areas where you feel challenged,
Yeah,
or where
yeah.
you would like to have somebody else's strength complement yours so
Mm.
that your company can move forward, right? Then you know who you want to look for, or
Mm.
you can see what kind of agreements you need to make with your business partners in order to make this a successful venture. Yeah.
That makes sense. So complement your strengths and weaknesses with other team members.
Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really interesting because our clients are spending so much time on financial due diligence, running numbers and discounted cash flow and all of this sort of stuff. But I think they need to spend a similar amount of time on culture, on themselves, strategic contemplation. And I literally have never heard this mentioned in M&A, and I think it's groundbreaking, but it's really missing. And I imagine their chances of success in the endeavor are much higher if they do this, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, because what you want to get away from is just being busy. Interesting that you mentioned it. This is not available on the market yet, but I just got a pre-print, like a test print of a planner
Oh,
yesterday.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, remember in our mastermind I shared, right? I have this weekly planner that kind of like every week, it divides your goals, and then every week you have your priorities, your motivation, and then key wins and all of
It's
that for
great.
reflection.
Yeah.
And so it's built on those principles. It's important to have that contemplation, even not just once, or like we do it in a mastermind, but I want to get people, when I work with them, I want to get them into a habit of doing this, of having this reflection. Because when you get into the habit of doing that, then you harvest insight over time, because then you have more data points,
Mm,
right? So if you
I like
every
that.
day you reflect, even if you did it once a week, Now, 52 weeks, you have 52 data points of reflection insights where you go, this is what worked well, this is what didn't work well,
Mm.
here's what I should keep doing or stop doing. And you would become better just by virtue of doing that.
And is your like one-on-one coaching, are you able to help people with this kind of build those goals, evaluate, measure? I mean, tell me a little bit more about how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that question, and I'm laughing because evaluate and measure. This is something in the very beginning of when we talk one-on-one coaching that I do with every one of my clients. And it seems so easy when I talk about goal setting, because
Mm.
especially executives, they're so used to setting goals for the organization. This is how
Hmm.
much revenue we need to make. This is our profit goal. And here's what we need to stand at the end of the year. And when it comes to their own goals,
Mm.
it's so hard. If I
Oh,
said, okay,
interesting.
what's your goal by the end of the year?
Right.
You personally, David.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
And why do you
how would
think that
they
is so
know?
difficult? Yeah. Why is it so difficult for them?
Yeah, I think because what they do with the company is they make it specific. What they do personally is they keep it vague. So then it becomes a moving target,
Hmm.
right? Because you're not being specific. It doesn't
Yeah.
have an end date. It doesn't have a metric. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
how we achieve paradises. So I asked for two things: a success measure and a progress measure.
Hmm.
The success measure defines whether or not or how we determine that the goal has been achieved,
Mm-hmm.
right? By when, how much of it needs to be achieved, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And the progress measure would determine how many times do we need to check in between
Mm-hmm.
to take a probe to see if it's working. Are we moving the needle in the right direction? What are those early indicators?
Mm. That's very cool. And you can apply this to many different things in the business, not just financial metrics, but other metrics as well.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, like I'll say, okay, so communication, right? It's one of
Yeah.
the items that I work with leaders a lot. So
Yeah.
they would say, I want to, improve my influence or executive presence. So let's say influence
Hmm.
is the thing. Okay, how
Hmm.
do you measure influence? It means something different to different people.
Hmm.
And let's say the person says, well, success for me would mean that my ideas would not get shut down every time, but that at least 2 out of 10 ideas I share a year, like I would get invited back.
Hmm.
Right. So there would be a follow-up, like this was interesting. And so I see there are more takers for it. I'm being taken serious.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So 2 out of 10 of those, right? So you see, we're getting more specific. We know by the
Yeah.
end of the year, this is what we want. How often do you dip in and what do you probe for? What will be meaningful, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then we could say maybe there are very specific meetings where you want the feedback from your skip level, right? If we were talking corporate
Yeah.
organization, or in a partner meeting, right? What would you like to see? If you had a goal that was affecting your team, if you'd like your team to be more engaged, what kind of things would you start to see evolve over time? And those are the things we would then check in for, the progress measure, the second measure that I mentioned earlier.
Mm. That's great. You talked about, I wanted to get back to communication, and I think you were kind of talking about maybe even measuring or understanding your communication style as a first step, um, and then working on that. Could you maybe expound on that a little more?
Help me out where we're going.
Yeah, yeah, just like that. I guess it's part of your initial assessment, like about someone's communication style and how they're heard, and and I guess how they listen too. Like, how do you help people with their communication and their listening? I guess is really like the bigger question.
How I help people with their communication is in the beginning really asking, what about communication are you after? It's
Hmm.
a wide field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
somebody may say, like, for me, I would like to stop rattling. I'm not really good in speaking up spontaneously, and I want to be more concise. So
Hmm.
I don't speak up spontaneously because I'm afraid I'm going to rattle. So I'm not speaking up at all anymore.
Hmm.
And it's impacting my career because my managers notice or my team notices, right? So that could be one example.
Wow.
So now we know what you are after. So it's very personalized when we talk about
Yeah.
individual coaching. Yeah.
Wow. So it's setting those individual goals. And
Mhm.
in the small business context, I mean, it's obviously different than sort of the C suite, but, I imagine it's just so crucial, especially when you're dealing with new people. These people come in and they
Mhm.
didn't hire these employees. They've parachuted in and now they're, responsible for them and managing them. And I imagine that communication is going to be just so crucial.
So yeah, absolutely it is. And I can say a few things to that. But I want to answer that question that you asked me earlier,
Yeah.
like, what do you do in the beginning?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the question that the audience is listening in on this can ask themselves is like, if
Mm-hmm.
they look for a coach in any area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you look for a communication coach, you want to work with me.
Yeah.
What problem are you trying to solve,
Right. Great question.
right?
Yeah.
That's what we start out with. Then I don't need necessarily an assessment. If
Hmm.
we know what problem we try to solve, we begin from there, you know. Not to say it's always, one problem, that we're not trying to fix everything.
No.
There's growth even if you don't fix one thing right away. But I think that's a more important question to ask, because that individualizes it for you. It's not a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when I work with organizations, then everybody in the room has to go along. But then what do we look for?
Mm-hmm.
Are we trying to let the team collaborate better cross functionally? Or if you
Mm-hmm.
have a new team, is it for you about to set the right tone and set expectations for how you want to work together, because you're still a very young organization
Hmm.
and you don't have a culture per se yet? Like,
Yes.
you're not having that
That
established yet, right? Or people don't know
that's
yet what to expect. Hmm.
that's great. I mean, that's exactly so helpful for these people that have just bought a business, coming right in. Right. They've got to set the tone and expectations
Yes. So that's where
from day
this
one, and they've
principal
got to get it right.
assessment.
Yeah.
By the way, that assessment that I mentioned earlier, that's where that would come in really, really handy, because very quickly you could see where everybody is and how they prefer to work, how
Hmm.
they articulate themselves from a communication perspective, what they value,
Hmm.
right? How they can behave like a fish in water, their natural personality,
Hmm.
and where they would have to stretch a little bit in order to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that would come in really, really handy. And then you can have, half day, 1 day workshop to simply come to an agreement at the end of that. This is how we will agree to work together. And then you
Wow.
do quarterly check-ins to follow up on, is this working, or do we need to fine tune? That could
Mm-hmm.
be a good starting point for a
A
startup, I could
great
say that.
idea.
Mhm.
Are you able to help put together and design those workshops for people, for business owners?
Oh, they're ready in my drawer, like right
Oh my
now.
gosh! Oh, that's great. That's great because I mean, a new business owner would have no idea what to do. That's great. So that's another thing you can help with. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, this is amazing, Karina. I've learned so much, and I think there's just so many great opportunities for people we work with buying businesses. I really hope going forward, the M&A world will embrace what you're doing, because I think it'll just help them so much more. How do people find you online?
Yeah, great question. That's zaradigm.com. That's like a paradigm, and you swap the
Mm-hmm.
P out with a Z, zaradigm.com.
Great.
And then you find tons of resources there. And if you go to zaradigm.com/hype, HIPE, hype,
Yeah.
that stands for high performance organization,
Oh,
then you
cool.
find that workshop that I just mentioned. You would find that there if you're interested in that. Our mastermind, that's catalyst.zaradigm.com. That's
Nice.
where the business owners could go, and I have a couple of other programs, but I wouldn't mention all of my services here. So for
Yeah,
that,
but
it would be
that's
better to
great.
just reach out to me. Yeah.
Cool. And in the on YouTube, we'll provide some links and other things for folks to find you there too. But this has been so insightful and helpful. Thank you so much for visiting with us, Karina.
What a joy speaking with you. Thank you, David.
Cheers.